Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, December the 12th, 2025. Today I want to return to the theme of Australia. In my video for yesterday, for Thursday, I briefly mentioned Australia in terms of this new legislation that's come in that's banned those under 16 from using social media. And I want to have another look at it in more detail. And this time I want to look at Australia's chart, as well as perhaps the astrology of those it might be affecting. For example, people who were just coming up to their 16th birthday at the time of this ban, because that might give us an idea about the generational impact. And then also there's the horoscope of the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. I'm not an expert on Australia. I've never been to Australia, so I'm going to kind of focus on the astrology rather than the details of the legislation. So anyway, let's start by looking at the astrology for today. So here is the chart for today, set for noon on Friday, December the 12th, 2025 in New York. And as far as what we can see, the moon is in late Virgo, I think. No, it's not. It's actually just gone into Libra. So New York time at noon, the moon is at 0 degrees 29 Libra. So if you're in the Americas, first half of the day, moon is in Virgo. Last half, it's in Libra. So there is a change. So we move to a situation where there are no traditional planets in air signs to a position where there are no traditional planets in earth signs. So we start with a lack of air and we end with a lack of earth. And that might mean that perhaps people become a little less grounded as the day progresses, perhaps more interested in ideas rather than the concrete facts. And also with moon in Libra, it is about other people. Moon in Libra, it is about the other, and perhaps we find it easier to relate on a verbal and conversational level. I mean, the moon is in Libra, it's not in a water sign, so we can't expect things to be too emotional, though it does make a trine to Pluto. So moon trine Pluto, and makes other aspects. Actually, it's just before the moon moves into Libra, it makes an opposition to Saturn and a square to Mars, and that might be important at the beginning of the day. The fact that Mars and Saturn are connected with the moon. So what do we have? We kind of have a T-square. So you're going to have moon opposition Saturn, then square Mars. So there is going to be a bit of a Mars-Saturn feel to today, and we shouldn't forget that the Sun is halfway between making a square to Saturn and making a square to Neptune. So there's the moon, and of course the moon makes a lot of aspects because there are many planets at the beginning of the sign. So you've got Mercury at 0 degrees or 1 degree Sagittarius. You've got Pluto at 2 degrees Aquarius. You've got Neptune at very close to 0 at 29 degrees Pisces. So the moon sort of picks up on all that as it goes forward into Libra, and once it moves into Libra, it makes a sextile to Mercury, and then it makes a trine to Pluto. So that moon sextile Mercury, could be quite a useful aspect, and that is a reminder that Mercury really has moved into Sagittarius. Sort of Mercury in Sagittarius, that's a very different place for Mercury to be. Mercury was in Scorpio, and there was perhaps a certain negativity to Mercury in Scorpio, but now, as you can see, Scorpio is finally empty, nothing in Scorpio, and so there is a change. And you can see now that you've got 4 planets in Sagittarius, a real Sagittarian emphasis here. and it's perhaps picked up by the moon. As the moon moves through Libra, it will make sextiles to all of those Sagittarius planets. So as we move into the weekend, strong Sagittarian emphasis, and I would perhaps suggest that we make the most of it. It is exciting, and perhaps it gives us an opportunity to look further afield. As going back to the moon, if you're not in America, well, in the UK, the moon moves into Libra at 4 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, 5 minutes past 4 in the afternoon if you're in Paris, for example. So outside America, for most of the day, the moon is in Virgo, and you'll be picking up on some of those aspects, like opposition, like the moon opposition Saturn and the square to Mars. But still, by the end of the day, you have got moon in Libra. Though, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it won't be until the very end of the day that the moon changes sign. So let's look at in fact, end of the day, probably into tomorrow morning, actually, into Saturday. So here is the chart for Sydney, Australia. As a representative of Australia and New Zealand, and so you can see at noon Sydney time, the moon is at 22 degrees Virgo. So it's got a long way before it moves into Libra, and so it really is a sort of complete moon in Virgo day. And you can see that the moon is making an opposition to Saturn, and it's making a square to Mars. So I'm afraid if you are in Australia and New Zealand, you may well be picking up on that T-square in quite a big way. Moon opposition Saturn, Mars on the T. And so that could mean that today things won't necessarily always be easy. It could be a bit slow, and there could be moments of frustration where it just doesn't seem that anything is going on, and everything has to be worked for. But if you keep plugging away, I think you'll eventually get some results. And moon does not stay in Virgo for forever. By tomorrow, the moon will be in Libra. Then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And here's the positions. So Mercury is just edging into Libra. So we've got a Mercury sign change here, a heliocentric sign change, of course. And when the Mercury moves into Libra, it makes oppositions to Saturn and Neptune. So today, there could be events which relate to that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. That Saturn-Neptune conjunction, the heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction, is still very close. It was exact yesterday. It's pretty much exact now, and Mercury is picking up on it. So perhaps we should see Mercury as being a bit of a trigger, and Mercury, doesn't just make the opposition to Saturn and Neptune. It's starting to make a square to Mars. So we have a heliocentric T-square involving Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and Mars on the T. Mars in Capricorn on the T. So that's quite an intense configuration. So you've got Mars and Saturn involved, and and Neptune. So it's something that could be stressful. So I talked about the fact that Mars was making a square to Saturn and Neptune, quite recently, and to an extent, that square started to lose its strength as Mars moved away from the square to Saturn and Neptune. But now Mercury is bringing it all together. So Mercury is kind of like a trigger planet, and so there could be events going on which tell us about this Saturn Neptune conjunction and what it's all about. So there may be grounds for thinking that it might not necessarily be a particularly easy day, at least on a collective and global level. So let me now switch to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, December the 12th, 2025. Aries. Mars is still in Sagittarius, but not for much longer. In a few days' time, it will be out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn. So, what does that mean? What should you be waiting for? How should you be preparing for this? So, while Mars is in Sagittarius, that should say something about you and what's important to you, where you are using your energy. And with Mars in Sagittarius, it's perhaps a time for exploration, for thinking about different things, maybe even trying out different things. And the reason for that is that it's not quite a time for you to absolutely make any decisions. You're still trying to work out exactly where is your stance, and your stance is varied at the moment. You're not absolutely sure about anything, and that's a good thing. And it's not surprising you're not feeling very sure about things. And I mean this again. I mean this in a positive way because of these 4 planets in Sagittarius now. 4 planets in Sagittarius means, Aries, that you should be going all over the place, thinking about this, thinking about that, considering that possibility, maybe listening to a couple of different views. It's probably a good idea to listen to more than one view. The trouble about listening to one view or reading about one view is that you might get caught in this view, and that might force you into sort of one course of action. It's better to have several views, several conflicting views, when you're then in a position where you're sort of balancing everything out and sort of working out what your next step should be. And of course your next step is symbolized by Mars moving into Capricorn, and that I think is a really big change. Mars moving into Capricorn takes place on Monday, and I'm very positive about Mars moving into Capricorn, especially for Aries. So that's something to look forward to. And in my video for Monday, I'll be telling you all about Mars moving into Capricorn. So yes, it is important to really try to have as much variety as possible, to go into exploration mode. I'm not saying it's always going to be easy. We looked at the heliocentric chart and we saw that Mars was making a square to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. I mean, that happened a couple of days ago, but now Mercury is triggering it. And so in spite of your best efforts to to give yourself variety, to try different things, there may be things bothering you nonetheless, and even things which you're afraid of. I mean, I know that Aries is supposed to be quite a fearless sign, but there could be times when you're just a bit unsure of yourself, and maybe it's okay to be unsure of yourself short term, because it shows that you're not fixed to any particular course of action, but you can take things too far. And you shouldn't forget that Mars is starting to make a square to Neptune. Over the weekend, the square between Mars and Neptune is exact. And probably, Aries, you're starting to feel Mars square Neptune. And Mars square Neptune, you can look at it in a positive way and say, well, you are looking around you, you're considering the best course of action, and you're not going to be convinced of anything. You can deal with a bit of confusion and ambiguity, and that's fine. But on a negative note, Mars square Neptune just might encourage you to get sidetracked. Something looks exciting, it looks glamorous, and you want to pursue it, and that might not have a fortunate result. So I would suggest that you are open-minded, you're prepared to consider anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you take action on the basis of your open-mindedness. Instead, you could perhaps imagine what something might be like, and sort of model it in your mind without necessarily doing anything. The time for action is Aries, when Mars moves into Capricorn. That's when you get the big change. And so before Mars moves into Capricorn, as Mars is right at the end of Sagittarius, I don't think that you should be doing anything concrete. Now, another thing that I should perhaps have mentioned is the fact that the moon is moving into Libra. And so at some stage in the day, the moon moves into Libra. You know, by the weekend, wherever you are, the moon will be into Libra, will be in Libra. So with a moon in Libra, you know, it's always a good idea to listen. A moon in Libra can be about being aware of, you know, other people's views and what other people are like, what other people are suggesting, and you don't have to follow anyone's lead, but you just have to be aware. You have to listen, and you know, listening is a good approach. Listening without following, listening without being influenced. Taurus. It may occur to you, Taurus, at the moment that things are not 100% perfect, that you know, things could always be better. And over the course of the day and into tomorrow, you might feel that there's a certain disharmony in the air, that things are not right, that something is just in the wrong place and it needs to be dealt with. And that might be how for example, moon moving into Libra works. I mean, if you think about moon in Libra, Libra as a sign is about balance, and you want things to be balanced. You want things to be in order, and if something is out of balance as a Taurus, you're going to really feel it, and you're going to want to do something about it. Now, the moon, as it moves into Libra, you know, makes an opposition to Neptune, makes a square to Mars, and you know, as the moon moves from Virgo to Libra, there may be a feeling of uncertainty. You're just not quite sure how things should be, and I therefore think it's important that you do things, you know, one step at a time. You have the confidence to know that, broadly speaking, you're going in the right direction, and if you keep moving in that right direction, because it is the right direction, and you don't get distracted, then I think that you're going to be fine. Now, as far as you know, outside distractions are concerned, you know, we do have the growing influence of a square between Mars and Neptune, and you know, that square between Mars and Neptune could really wrong foot you. It could be about another person's influence, what another person is suggesting, and you know, someone might be very convincing, but they might be also leading you in the wrong direction, and you shouldn't think that any one person has got all the answers. Yeah, someone might appear to be very confident, but the question is, how confident are they really? And it just may be the case that they're not confident at all. You know, behind their mask, they don't really know what they're doing, they don't really know what they're talking about. So don't put too much trust in any one person, because you know, that might be, you know, quite a dangerous strategy. Instead, you know, give people a fair hearing by all means, but just consider the possibility that appearances can be deceptive, and in the end, Taurus, you are going to have to work it out for yourself. And you know, like yesterday, and I think the day before, you're able to be, you know, quite verbal, you know, even if there are moments of confusion. You're able to express that confusion and perhaps demand answers. And if something isn't right, if something hasn't been done properly, then Taurus, I think that you can be clear about this, and you can maybe demand answers. So you don't necessarily have to put up with confusion, particularly if that confusion is being imposed upon you by outside forces. You can ask direct questions, and if you're annoyed about something, I think it's going to be relatively easy to express this annoyance, and also to, you know, express the fundamental power of your personality. You do give the impression that you are holding something back, that, you know, there are reserves of power waiting to be put into action, and you know, other people pick up on this, and because of this, I think there's a good chance, Taurus, that you're treated with a certain amount of respect, because I think that at some level people are aware of what you can do, and because people have this awareness, they want to avoid the problem. They want to maybe uh, get out of your way, or better still, they want to placate you. They want to make you happy. So just by showing a little bit of irritation, a little bit of impatience, it might be the best way to get people's attention. Gemini, you are, I'm sure, getting used to the fact that Mercury has changed sign, that Mercury is now in Sagittarius, in your opposite sign. So you've now got 4 planets in Sagittarius. And so with 4 planets in Sagittarius, you are really having to consider the other person, other people. It's not all about you. And you are aware that what other people do, what other people suggest, can have a powerful impact on you. And so Gemini, don't think that it's always down to you to make the decisions, to decide what you're going to do next, because that's not the case. You have to make some effort to understand what other people want, and what other people are going to do next. And so you might feel yourself to be an individual. It's always good to be an individual, but if you try to do everything on your own, you insist on doing everything on your own, particularly if you've got big plans, then it might not work out, and in fact you might need other people's help, other people's advice, and indeed, Gemini, I think that you're going to be quite good at getting on with other people, soliciting other people's help, because there's just something about you. If you make the effort, you can be easygoing, you can be relaxed, you can be sociable. Your social skills, I think, are going to be much better than average. So that links with all these planets in Sagittarius. So if you want anything from anyone, I think there's a good chance you're going to get it. And whatever you're planning, whatever you want to do, just always take into consideration the human dimension, because at the moment it matters. And in the process, Gemini, I don't think you're going to be compromising anything. I think that you're very clear as you move into the weekend about what you want to do. I think that you can be very creative. You can do stuff that is important to you. And don't forget that the moon is making a sextile to Mercury. It's also making a trine to Pluto. So by the end of the day, you can be doing stuff that you're very comfortable with, that you feel happy about. And Mercury, in fact, Mercury is making a sextile to Pluto, and it just could be that you can not just be creative and be doing stuff that you're very pleased about, but also that you can be engaging other people in whatever you're doing. So if you need support, if you're trying to convince someone that your way is the best way, then I think that your powers of persuasion are going to be very good. Cancer. Moon is shifting. Moon is shifting from Virgo to Libra. And this shift, it's an important sign change, not just because you've got a situation where the moon is carrying all the earth. That's how it starts, with Moon and Virgo, the only traditional planet in an earth sign, to a position where it moves into Libra, where it's carrying all the air, the only traditional planet in an air sign. And that might mean that your responsibility shifts. You're having to perhaps make up for other people's deficiencies. And they have a deficiency in one area, perhaps they are not being very grounded, they're not really understanding the material and financial dimension. That might be one issue, and you're having to make up for other people's lack. And then by the end of the day and into tomorrow, it could be down to you to make sure that people are thinking straight. Not everyone can think straight. although the average Cancer is pretty intelligent and can work out what's important and can sort of guide people in the right direction. Guide which people? Well, when the moon moves into Libra, it is moving into a part of your chart which is connected with the home and family. So, as you move into the weekend, I think that your family are going to become more important. And if there's any family members around, I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your family. It may not just be your family. It might be your home, and whatever is fundamental to your existence, the things that are really important to you, are the things that you should be focusing on. And that might mean, as the moon moves into Libra, that you don't want to spend too much time worrying about what's going on in the outside world. It's not okay, you're aware of what's happening, but you don't have to be directly engaged. Instead you can maybe watch from a distance, and it's important that you're able to put your own security needs first. So if you can do that, I think that would very much be the right approach. And as the moon moves into Libra, it makes an opposition to Saturn, makes an opposition to Neptune, makes a square to Mars. Well, in fact, just before it moves into Libra. So that T square, moon opposition, particularly moon opposition Neptune, moon square Mars, it might be frustrating at times. There may be moments of frustration, particularly at the beginning of the day, where you just don't quite know what's going on, and that might explain why you feel that you need to put the priority on security. Why you might not want to take social risks, for example, because you understand that things are not necessarily especially stable, and things are going on, but you don't necessarily understand, and you just know that now is not the right time. That perhaps you should sort of wait things out. I mean, things will change, but right now we're in a state of change. And one reason we're in a state of change, for example, is that Mars is about to move into Capricorn. So Mars moving into Capricorn, moves into Capricorn on Monday. That's likely to have an influence on you. Mars moving into a cardinal sign. Mars moving into a sign which is quite strong as well. And you perhaps need to keep an eye on social changes and changes within the various relationships you're in because of Mars's imminent sign change. So Cancer, in general, I think that a fairly cautious approach is probably best as you move into the weekend. And I don't think it's a time when you should be sort of taking risks or doing anything you've never done before. And you shouldn't push things, and you shouldn't push people as well. Moon opposition Saturn might represent a misunderstanding, and so you shouldn't put yourself into a position where a misunderstanding might happen. Now, I should end on a positive note, and by the end of the day, the moon is moving towards a sextile of Mercury and a trine to Pluto. And I think it's likely, Cancer, that once you're able to ground yourself, then things start to make sense. You become aware of what you can do, and your mind is starting to work. But if you want your mind to work, you're going to need space. If you're surrounded by people, if you've got everyone around you, lots of different demands, you're not going to be able to think straight. But on your own, once you've got clarity, a clear environment, there aren't people in your way, there aren't major events to worry about. Well, it should be the case. I mean, it's the end of a week, things should be calming down. Once you get that calm, you'll be able to think straight, and you'll be able to, I think, in the end, make the right decisions. Leo. a lot of planets now in Sagittarius. So between now and Monday, we've got 4 planets in Sagittarius: Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Mars. Now that Sagittarius emphasis will die down on Monday, and that is because Mars changes sign. It moves out of Sagittarius into Capricorn. So Leo, do take advantage of this Sagittarius emphasis, and it might be about realizing what you can do. There are a lot of things that you can do, and whatever it is an essential reflection of who you are. So it's not a time, for example, to be doing anything which is related to someone else's interests. I mean, you might be tempted in that way. So you might be pressurized to do something that another person is interested in that you personally couldn't care less about. I mean, it might be the polite thing to do, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. You should be thinking about what you want to do, what's important to you. It's about your creativity. It's not about anyone else's creativity. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't involve other people in what you're doing, but I think it's going to be important that things happen on your terms. It's not because you're selfish. It's just because you're aware of the demands of the time. We all have our role. All of us have our role. I was talking about, the I Ching, where I always do my I Ching readings, and, one I Ching hexagram that's been coming up quite a lot is the family. And in the family, we have a hierarchy, and so we have to be aware of our position in the hierarchy. And we've got another hexagram which talks about hierarchies. I mean, you've got the army. So the hierarchy is important in I Ching land, perhaps because it's quite a traditional oracle, and it's all about where we are in a structure. So we're talking about where you are in a structure. Of course, this is not about the I Ching, but it's also perhaps about a changing structure and what your role is at the moment. So what is your responsibility to the broader hierarchy, to the broader system? And so your responsibility right now is to be yourself. So you are yourself because you're being unselfish. I mean, that might sound contradictory, but the selfish thing to do is to follow the crowd, because no one benefits. You're not providing anything original. You're not providing anything unique. You're not expanding anything. You're not enriching anything if you're following the crowd, and it's not the right thing to do. So I'm just encouraging you to make the most of the energies at the moment. Those 4 planets in Sagittarius, it should be all about you, but not in a selfish way, in a way that is about making everyone's life better. And it does seem that you have a unique contribution, and you have a responsibility to make sure that you fulfill that obligation. And so I'm quite positive about all of this, and I'm also quite positive about your ability to hold your own, and in the process to be persuasive. Doing your own thing, doing something that is unique, is sometimes difficult because there can be resistance. But if there is resistance, Leo, I think you're going to be very good at being persuasive, perhaps showing a bit of charm, and ensuring that things do go your way, that things unfold at the right pace, and you can be convincing. So if you need to convince anyone, I think that your charm and charisma should do the trick. Virgo. The moon is late Virgo, early Libra. Kind of depends on your time zone, but wherever you are, there's going to be a chunk of the day where the moon is in Virgo. And the moon in Virgo is making, quite a few aspects. So, what is the moon in Virgo doing? The moon is in late Virgo is making an opposition to Saturn, it's making a square to Mars, it's making an opposition to Neptune. And this can't be helped. So what we have is a T-square involving your sign. It's a T-square that is not necessarily going to last very long, because the moon eventually moves into Libra, and we move into something else. But it could be that at the beginning of the day, especially if you're in Eurasia and Australasia, there could be real pressure, and there could be a frustration. I mean, how does the frustration work out? Well, for one thing, you've got Moon opposition Saturn and Neptune. So Moon in Virgo, that's like you wanting everything done, everything sorted out. That's how you'd like it, but you don't necessarily get your way. Other people have their own way of doing things, and you just might be aware of just external pressure that you don't fully understand, but it might seem very real. And the question is, how do you resolve it? Well, one way of resolving it is to just hold firm to what you believe in, hold firm to your world and your values, remembering that we've got 4 planets in Sagittarius right now, and the Sagittarius is in the Virgo horoscope is right at the bottom of the chart. So there would be our T-square. So we would have Moon opposition Saturn and Neptune, and then you've got Mars on the T and Sun almost on the T. And so the planet on the T is often the resolution. So the Sagittarius is the resolution, and that means thinking about what is important, holding firm to what you believe in. And if you can do that, then I think that you should be able to ride the storm and not get too frustrated. If you do feel frustrated, if you feel that things are just not going as fast as you'd like, perhaps other people are being irritating, then it really does matter that you remind yourself of what is important and get your priorities right. And once you realize your priorities and you're clear about your priorities, then I think that things should start to improve. And also, Virgo, throughout the day, your ability to get on with people isn't going to be too bad. Yeah, so some people might be frustrating, but at the same time, you know how to manage them. And sometimes, just being pleasant is enough. So you're pleasant with people, but you still hold firm. If you can do that, then, in the end, there's a very good chance that you can sort of get your way. Now, the moon does at a certain stage move into Libra. Okay, it might not be until tomorrow, but when the moon does move into Libra, it does make a sextile to Mercury, your ruler. So with moon sextile Mercury, that is a fortunate aspect, but quite a practical aspect as well. And it could be about your own priorities and what is important to you, and being able to explain what is important to you. It might be about your material needs. So if there's something you want of a material nature, I think with that moon sextile Mercury, I think that you'll be able to tell people about it. And because at the moment you're quite charming, I think there's a real chance that you can persuade people that they should perhaps give in or accommodate you in some way. So if there's anything of a material nature, or perhaps relating to your resources, you're not happy about as you move into the weekend, then I think that you can make some important changes. You can tell people what you want, and I think in most cases they will listen. Libra. the moon is edging into your sign. Slowly. For much of the day, the moon is going to be in Virgo. In fact, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, all the day the moon is going to be in Virgo. But in the end, the moon does get into Libra. Of course, if you're in the Americas, particularly out west, the West Coast, or California, or even Hawaii and Alaska, you get quite a blast of moon in Libra at a relatively early stage in the day. And so, moon in Libra does, I think, make you feel better. I mean, it's good that moon is moving into Libra, and it's kind of worth waiting for. I mean, for a start, you've got moon in your sign, and so when the moon is in your sign, you're just feeling so much better about yourself. You feel that you're able to relate, and matters are made better by the fact that the moon, when it moves into Libra, is making a sextile to Mercury and also making a trine to Pluto. So those aspects do really make you feel good and allow you to tune into your creativity. You can really give a good account of yourself. I mean, you're already able to give a good account of yourself, and I think that you certainly benefit from the fact that Mercury is moving through, or just moved into Sagittarius. So Mercury in Sagittarius Libra can be about you being able to talk about your ideas, talk about what's important to you, and you don't have to be too careful. With all those planets in Sagittarius, feel free to tell everyone what's on your mind. I think you'll be able to get away with it. Okay, not everyone might agree with you, but I think by and large, your ability to make conversation and to engage with the facts, whatever those facts might be, is going to be pretty good. But I think that you're going to be on best form once the moon moves into Libra, whenever that might be. So yeah, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, you're going to have to wait until tomorrow to get the full blast of moon in Libra. But whenever it happens, it will happen. And so whatever you're doing, I do think that things are likely to get better, as the day progresses. But maybe at the beginning of the day, things might be a bit frustrating. Things might be a bit slow, and you do have to also be aware that Mars is making a square to Neptune. That Mars square Neptune, I think, is exact over the weekend. But Mars square Neptune, does suggest that certain people who perhaps should know better don't seem to know quite what they're doing. They're going all over the place. They might be confused. They might have ideas which may not be especially helpful. And I would perhaps suggest that you take what other people say and suggest with a pinch of salt. Just because someone sounds very convincing, they seem very sure of their ground, doesn't necessarily mean that they really know what they're doing. And that applies even to people you are very familiar with, people you share living space with, people you might be married to or have relationships with. They might be wonderful people, but that doesn't mean to say they can't at times get confused. And with Mars square Neptune, you should expect certain people to be confused, and you certainly shouldn't take what anyone says at face value. But I will be talking about Mars square Neptune in more detail in my next video when I look at the weekend. But overall, Libra, I do feel that things are improving, and at the same time, you're going to be quite good at protecting yourself on a verbal level. And this has been the case for quite a few days, that verbally you've been quite fluent, and if you have ideas or something's bothering you, then you can talk about it with, I think, real ease and power as well. And it's a power that matters, and you do come over as being very convincing, as someone who people are prepared to listen to. So I think that there is a place for standing up for yourself, and if you do need to stand up for yourself, Libra, then I think you're going to find that is something that is really very easy to do. Scorpio. Mars is your ruler, and Mars is getting ready to change signs. So at the moment, Mars is in late Sagittarius, very late Sagittarius, and on Monday, Mars moves into Capricorn. So it's a time of transition for you, and that means perhaps, Scorpio, that over the next few days you shouldn't necessarily feel that you have to commit yourself to anything. Instead, just watch, allow things to develop, take notes. At a later stage you can commit yourself, but not now. I think it's better that you perhaps sort of marshal your resources, make sure that you've got everything you need for the next stage, whatever that next stage might be, and you don't allow yourself to be forced into making a commitment, because if you make a commitment too early, you're basing your ideas on a set of facts which may very soon be out of date. Yeah, it can happen, and you don't want to be obsolete or find that your plans are suddenly obsolete. That's absolutely what you don't need. So I would overall suggest that you do hold fire, and you don't allow yourself to be deceived. It's possible that you can be deceived, because Mars is making a square to Neptune, and this square between Mars and Neptune, I think it's exact over the weekend. And so Mars square Neptune, if you're not careful, you could be pulled all over the place, and you might get involved in something that really doesn't interest you. I mean, it doesn't interest you, but you get involved in it anyway. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that you aren't able to see the dangers in something. Something seems to be harmless when in actual fact it could lead you it could lead you down a dead end, and that's just another reason not to make commitments, not to create changes, not to sign on a dotted line, because things are in flux, and they will be in flux until Monday, when Mars moves into Capricorn. That's a huge sign change. Mars moving out of Sagittarius, Mars moving into the sign of its exaltation, and so a lot is about to change. But while you're on the verge of change, on the brink of this change, I don't feel that there is a great deal that actually needs to be done. And especially with the moon starting to move into Libra, Libra is a sign before Scorpio. So again, you're building up for two things which haven't happened yet. Mars has not moved into Capricorn. The moon has not moved into Scorpio. It hasn't happened yet. So that might mean that you're neither in one place nor the other. And you might want to do something. You might feel that you have to do something, but you don't have to do anything at all. And instead, you should just have a stance of quiet optimism, knowing that things are going to get better, knowing for sure that things are going to get better. And you can certainly transmit this optimism. You can tell everyone that things are looking good. You can be sort of waiting quietly for the change to happen. But right now, today and into the weekend, I just don't think that there's really anything that needs to be done, and decisive action should probably be avoided. Sagittarius. So this is the peak of the Sagittarius season. It doesn't get any more Sagittarius than this. 4 planets in Sagittarius, 4 planets in your sign, and this does give you a lot of power. It also gives you a lot of presence, and you can really, be yourself, and you don't have to apologize. I mean, ideally, Sagittarians shouldn't apologize. Why should you want to apologize? You're just being open and honest, and there's nothing that needs to be held back. And so that perhaps should be your weekend, and it is a time of year often when people are more sociable in the run up to Christmas, and so I think that you're very much going to be able to enter into the spirit of things. So things are looking good, and of course, if you're coming to this reading from a perspective of your sun, I know that some people look at these readings from a view of their ascendant, others it's a sun. A few may do this reading because Sagittarius is your moon sign. But if you're coming at it from a perspective of your sun sign, of course it's the birthday season, isn't it? I don't know whether you've had your birthday or not had your birthday. I mean, all things being equal, 2/3 of the people watching, 2/3 of those with Sun and Sagittarius have already had their birthday, because the Sun is now at 20 degrees Sagittarius. But it is your time of year, very much your time of year. Even if you've got Sagittarius ascendant, or you've got the Moon in Sagittarius, and your Sun isn't in this sign, so it's all potentially looking good, and it's important that no one spoils the fun. And I say this because Mars in Sagittarius is starting to make a square to Neptune, and in fact Mars is still making a square to Saturn. So there could be things sort of trying to drag you down, trying to spoil the party, trying to get you to worry about things that you just shouldn't really be worrying about. I think this is a time to be thinking about yourself, and don't allow external forces to upset your balance and to make you feel self-conscious, because it really is very important at the moment, Sagittarius, that you are able to project the full force of your personality. And I think this is going to be easier once the moon moves out of Virgo into Libra. So the beginning of the day, the moon is in Virgo, and the trouble about the moon being in Virgo is it makes an opposition to Saturn, makes an opposition to Neptune. It does make a square to Mars, and so this opposition could be unsettling. Yeah, you have your ambitions, but there's always something trying to undermine these ambitions, trying to sort of make you feel not particularly good about things, trying to question your self-confidence. But with this opposition, it is also a T-square, because you've got Moon opposition Saturn and Neptune, but then you've got Mars on the T, and so Mars is the solution. And what is the solution? Mars in Sagittarius. If you are feeling conflicted, if things aren't working out, then at all, which they should be working out, but I mean, just in case they aren't, then all you have to do is just be yourself. If you are assertive, then that's the solution. And the more assertive you are, just the easier it is to make your impression felt. Capricorn. The moon is edging into Libra. So the moon is, it starts the day sort of late Virgo, but it does in the end move into Libra. Okay, moon might not move into Libra until tomorrow, but if you're in the Americas, there is a good chunk of the day where you have the moon in Libra from sort of a late morning onwards. I think sort of New York time, the moon moves into Libra about 11:04 a.m. in the morning. And so with the moon moving into Libra, okay, it might be Friday, the last day of the week, and I suppose I'm particularly talking about sort of American Capricorns. Okay, if you're a European Capricorn, we're talking about something that doesn't happen until the late afternoon. But if you are in Europe or America, there is this stage in the day where you get this transition from Virgo to Libra, and when the moon moves into Libra, that just suddenly might make you feel quite motivated. And just as the weekend is ending, you might feel, oh, there's things you want to do. It's a time when you maybe just want to be noticed and you want to be taken seriously. And if you're working today, then it might occur to you that just as something that you want to do, there's something that needs to be done. And the moon, when it moves into Libra, it does make a sextile to Mercury, and it also makes a trine to Pluto. So there may just be a certain stage where you can bring to bear quite a lot of power, and you can really get noticed. So if there's something you want, you suddenly realize it at the last moment that something needs to be done, then I think that you're going to be able to project yourself very well. And the moon does stay in Libra through into the weekend, so don't necessarily think that Friday is the end. There may be practical things that need to be done as you move into the weekend. Okay, do they need to be done? Well, it's best that they're done, because you can do a good job, and you can really apply yourself to the things that matter. So I think that looking at Friday, moving into the weekend, Capricorn, I think that you should see a sort of a steady improvement, and probably the most difficult part of the day is going to be the first part, when the moon is moving through late Virgo. Moon in late Virgo, there could be a lot of doubts. Things may not run smoothly. You've got moon making an opposition to Saturn. I mean, that's how the day starts, how Friday starts, with moon opposition Saturn. And moon opposition Saturn can be a situation which is a bit of a conflict. Maybe you realize that you and someone else don't necessarily see eye to eye on something. And you should see eye to eye, but somehow you don't. And so that is certainly something that you might want to think about, that you might be concerned about. And then the moon makes an opposition to Neptune. So there may be moments in the day where you don't fully know what's going on. And I think it's just important to really go back to that moon in Libra. That moon moving into Libra really does matter. That's when things change, when things change for the better. So so I don't normally obsess completely about time. I try to give an overall view, but I think in this case it does matter. So to give you an idea about times, at 4:04 this afternoon, Friday afternoon, if you're in the UK, the moon moves into Libra. That's 5:04 in the afternoon if you're in Europe. If you're in California, it's fine, because the moon is going to be in pretty much in Libra, all day long, West Coast. But if you're in Australia, then moon in Libra is really that's more about tomorrow. So really do try to think about when that sign change happens. I mean, I know that I shouldn't be burdening you with that, but I think in this case, it's a situation where precise timing really does matter. So just think about time zones, and think about the fact that GMT, moon moves into Libra at 4:04 in the afternoon. So if you get the timing right, and you just start the day being quite cautious, but then you sort of get into your swing as the day progresses, as you move into the weekend, I think that's the right way to handle things. Aquarius. Don't forget, Aquarius, that we now have a lot of planets in Sagittarius. We've got 4 planets in Sagittarius. So that is quite a lot. We've got Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars in Sagittarius, and that says something about you and what is important to you, and where your experiences are. And 4 planets in Sagittarius can make you, I think, pretty sociable. You're aware of other people. you're aware of what other people can offer. And I think that this is a time when, as far as is possible, you should meet people, go to parties, go to other gatherings, check on other people. So, for example, if you've got friends or associates, you haven't seen them for ages, try to get back in touch, because I think that you can be really, very, very effective. And additionally, you can just sort of enjoy people's company, and you can come over as being, a fun person. And as the day progresses, the more so. So maybe at the beginning of the day, you're not feeling 100% great. I don't think at the beginning of the day you are actually feeling especially sociable. That might be something that you just don't want to be bothered with. But as the day progresses, as the moon moves from Virgo into Libra, you start to feel better, your spirits start to improve, and you're in the mood for things which are new and exciting. And this excitement is certainly available. It doesn't have to be all about you. It can be about what other people have to contribute. Having said all that, while it is important to be aware of what other people are doing, to be sociable, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take everyone at face value. People come up with all sorts of ideas, suggestions. You might be pushed into doing one thing or another thing. No, you don't have to compromise anything. I think that is actually very important. If you just do what you're told, if you just become a follower, well, no, that's not what I'm suggesting. You can be sociable and stay in control. If you find yourself being pushed in any particular direction, well, that's not what I mean. That's not such a good thing. I think if you feel that you have to agree to something, or you're being pressurized to agree to something, well, then the answer is no. That's different, because you don't know the facts, and there is a real chance that you get confused. So don't take things too far. You need to kind of keep moving. I mean, that's important. With 4 planets in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a sign which is about movement, because if you stay in one place for too long, well, you'll be missing opportunities. It will get boring. But worse than that, if you stay in one place too long, you might be overly influenced by that particular place, by that particular person you're talking to. So giving yourself variety throughout the day, I think is very important. And it's not just about today. It's as you move into the weekend, making sure that you have a varied schedule. If all your energies are focused on one thing, that might not be quite so healthy. Pisces, you might at the moment be feeling quite ambitious. You might feel that the current situation isn't good enough, and you would like to take things further and further, and move from one thing to another, having a lot of experimentation, and that's probably the way forward. And do be ambitious, and at the same time be curious. You might think you've got everything you need, but maybe there's something else you could take advantage of. So don't be satisfied with what you've got. Don't rest on your laurels, and don't think that just because it's Friday, just because it's nearly Christmas, that you can just pack up shop and that's it. Because we do have 4 planets in Sagittarius, and those 4 planets in Sagittarius, well, that strength is not going to last forever. On Monday, Mars moves into Capricorn, so you lose that Sagittarius emphasis. And I really think that this Sagittarius emphasis can work for you. So what is this about? It's about you, Pisces, having just the inspiration to know what needs to be done, having the inspiration to know what works, making connections. You might see things which on the surface seem completely disconnected, but you see the links. And because you can see the links, you can really start to make sense of it all. And so I'm quite optimistic, about the next few days, about the weekend, provided you just make the most of it. I mean, I think there is a danger that you just allow things to slide. You get overly influenced by what other people want. You get distracted. Yeah, I mean, all of this could happen, but it shouldn't happen. So ask yourself, Pisces, what are you working towards? What's important to you? What would you like to achieve maybe by Christmas? And what do you need to do? And I just feel that the next few days could be important. Even if you're not planning on doing something major, even if you feel you don't have the opportunity, there's something you can do in your own way, because you're being given an opportunity. And if you're being given an opportunity, then it naturally follows that you should have the tools to make the most of this opportunity. The universe has given you those tools. So ask yourself how you want to project yourself, because right now I do believe that you can project yourself very well, and you perhaps need to sort of get through any sort of reservations. Sure, there could be reservations. Mars has just made a square to Saturn, and then I think this weekend Mars makes a square to Neptune. I think that Mars square Neptune could possibly work in your favor. I don't think it's necessarily a bad aspect for you, Pisces. The reason being because I just think you understand the fundamental energies there, and part of it could be about finding a way to untangle some of your reservations, even your fears, and just realizing that what you thought was a major block is nothing. You can just rush past it in that sort of watery way, but still having that spark. And so Pisces, don't be distracted. Don't get caught too much on the negative. Some Pisceans might. They might be looking at what's happening, and they might think that, it's all pointless. It's going nowhere. There's no point in trying. It's all futile. You've got people to worry about. Other people are not being helpful. You've got moon opposition. Yeah, you've got moon opposition Saturn at the beginning of today. Moon opposition Neptune. No point. But it's just a passing negativity. And once you get through that negativity, there will, I think, be a sense of excitement. An excitement about what you can achieve. So, over the next few days, I really would encourage you to sort of make the most of this really quite massive Sagittarian emphasis. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from a perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 15, modesty. On the surface, not an especially exciting hexagram. It's not about a great show. And you could say that this might sort of contradict the astrology to some extent. I was talking about there being 4 planets in Sagittarius. 4 planets in Sagittarius. You think that that's a lot of energy, pushing oneself forward, getting a lot of attention. But with modesty, we don't want to deliberately draw attention to ourselves. It's not a time for boasting. We shouldn't be worrying if we're being ignored or not. Some of us don't like being ignored, but sometimes it doesn't really matter. Indeed, it shouldn't matter, because we are the ones that matter. We're the ones that matter. It doesn't matter how other people respond to us. So modesty is the way forward, and we have 2 lines moving. And so the bottom line moves, and the I Ching says, be modest about your own modesty, or it says, have humility about your own humility. It's, in other words, it's kind of saying, don't cover yourself in sackcloth and ashes. Don't make too much of a thing about your modesty. Just be yourself. If something needs to be done, you do it. If you get attention for what you do, if you get attention for what you're doing, okay, you get attention. Don't shy away from attention just for the sake of it. And if you happen to be praised for what you're doing, well, yeah, that's great. You get praised. It doesn't matter. So don't hide things, and certainly don't be too modest. And that's what it means by being, modest about your modesty. It's not about this sort of I'm so humble, all this kind of thing. That's absolutely not what it's about. Then the second line moves, and again we remain modest, and we don't make much of an effort to attract attention. We just do what we can do, but in the process we probably do attract attention. We do things on our own, in our own way, and it's the right thing. Because if we're true to ourselves, we don't need any adornment. We don't need to boast. Our actions speak for themselves, and I think in our own quiet way we can be recognized, but we shouldn't care about being recognized. Now, that means that this hexagram and the moving lines are pretty positive, and so the hexagram it moves to, when we knock out these bottom two lines, when these bottom two lines move from being broken to being unbroken, that means that we move to hexagram number 11, which is peace. Everything is in order. Everything is in the right place. Everything works. It's great. I mean, it's not great because great implies some big action, something dramatic. Nothing dramatic is going on, but we just feel good about ourselves. And yeah, everything is in the right place, and most importantly, things are moving. There is just a natural flow here, and so whatever it is we want to do, provided it's in accord with our own destiny, we can do it. So regardless of what I said about the astrology, the I Ching is indicating that it should be a really good day where, things do have a natural flow to them. And I want to finish by looking again at Australia. And it seems to me to be, quite a dramatic thing to do to prevent young people from, or ban young people. I don't know about the details. Remember, I'm not Australian. I've never been to Australia. I don't know what it's like in Australia. So I'm just looking at what I've read in the news. I haven't even gone into it in great detail, but I'm really trying to focus on the astrology of the matter. So it seems a strange thing to do logically, to want to stop people under 16 from using social media, especially given what's been happening, over the last few years and with COVID. And, I believe that, in many cases, there are young people who have relied on social media to be in contact. Things have changed. You think about friendship in different ways, people meeting face to face and so forth, but friendships and associations can take place on many different levels, and a lot of it is taking place online. And so those online relationships, I know that there's a sort of a negative view of online contact, but it seems that young people are, particularly the COVID generation, have learnt to use the internet and have learnt to interact with each other on the internet. So getting rid of trying to stop young people using the internet if they're under 16, just does seem rather strange, and I wonder to what extent it is in accord with Australia's chart. So let's start off by looking at a chart for Australia. So one chart you could use is when Australia kind of became united. It wasn't it? I don't know. Was it 6 territories, sort of, which were sort of British colonies, and they were all sort of brought together on January the 1st, 1901. So let's look at Australia's chart. And so here's the Australian chart for the beginning of 1901, and this chart is set for Melbourne because I think that Melbourne at the time was the temporary capital of Australia. So Australia is a country that has a lot of planets in Sagittarius. Like now, it came into being with Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury in Sagittarius, and maybe that sort of conforms with some of the sort of stereotypes one has about Australians. So if you're Australian, forgive me. I mean, if I have some stereotypes of them, but I think one stereotype of Australians is they're quite Sagittarian. They're quite blunt. They say what they feel. They don't mince their words. It may not be correct, but that's just a stereotype I have. And so that stereotype certainly fits with the Sagittarian planets. And you've got sort of Mercury opposition Neptune, because we should be thinking about Mercury at the moment, because this is a Mercury event. Suddenly saying that those under 16 can't use social media, so that's a Mercury event. And so Mercury is opposition Neptune. Mercury is conjunct Jupiter. So Mercury conjunct Jupiter in Sagittarius is the desire to communicate. It is the desire to say what you want, and to be quite clear, and indeed to be quite blunt about it. And it's opposition Neptune. And so opposition Neptune, that might say something about the country and how the country perhaps sees its final destination. And maybe Mercury conjunct Jupiter can sometimes be over-optimistic. Again, another perception of Australia. It is the future. I mean, okay, maybe not quite so much at the moment, but people for a few decades ago, emigrating to Australia, leaving the UK, going to Australia seemed to be sort of a positive step, getting away from Britain and all its troubles, going to Australia. So I think that to an extent, this chart can say something about Australia's image, what Australia is really like. I don't know. I've never been there, but there is another side here to Australia, which is it's got a Sun conjunct Saturn. Sun conjunct Saturn in Capricorn, and it's got Moon in Taurus, and it's got Mars in Virgo. So in spite of all that Sagittarius stuff, there are a lot of planets in Earth signs. It's got 4 personal planets in Earth signs, and that might be about a certain practicality there. And you've got to make sure that everything is in order. You think of Earth signs, you could think about resources, and the fact that the Australian economy is, to some extent, is based on resources, whether it's mining or agriculture. So there is a very earthy element to this chart. And what's kind of surprising about Australia is that one associates Australia with the sea, with surfing and swimming and Australian swimmers, and the water seems to be very important to Australians, and also the dangers in the sea, like sharks. So yeah, again, I don't know whether that's true, having never been to Australia, but the sea is very much part of the Australian myth. But the chart of Australia has no planets in water. That's nothing, not even an outer planet. And so when you've got a planet, when you've got no water, well, that might mean the desire for water. I don't know how that would work, but perhaps the sea and rivers is important. It also could say something about the issues of water. All of us are living in a water crisis. Doesn't matter what part of the world you're living in, and Australia has a lot of desert, and I'm sure that water is going to be very important for Australia. And so the lack of water might be somewhat disturbing in terms of Australia's future. But I'm kind of being a bit vague here. And what I really wanted to do by looking at Australia's chart is to wonder, what was happening to Australia, when this decision was made to ban those under 16 from using social media. Now, it is quite possible that it's a nothing, that in practice it will be ignored and that it will make no difference to anyone. And so maybe it's not such a significant event, but still I think it would be interesting to see what was going on for Australia when you had this ban. So here is the social media ban itself, which took place at midnight on December the 10th. And I've set the chart for Canberra, being the capital of Australia. I think the ban came in using local time, so it would have changed depending on what part of Australia one was in. And so, but what kind of transits did Australia have? And well, one thing that was going on at the time of this ban was we had an opposition between Mercury and Uranus, and this opposition between Mercury and Uranus is right on Australia's nodes. So there is a nodal axis. So Uranus was on Australia's south node, sort of south node in Taurus, and so this might say something about Australia and where it regards its destination as being. And Mercury opposition Uranus, you think about Mercury opposition Uranus as being about free speech, Mercury Uranus, but then you have to remember that it's in fixed signs, and there could be something that is quite controlling about it. So that's certainly something that we have to think about, and also it seems to contradict this ban the very Sagittarian nature of Australia. All those planets in Sagittarius. So Australia has this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in Sagittarius. Mercury-Jupiter in conjunction in Sagittarius is about free communication. That's what it is about. And Saturn is at 25 Pisces. So Saturn is square Australia's Jupiter. It's moving towards a square of Australia's Mercury. And we've got a Mars-Saturn square at the time of this ban. So this Mars-Saturn square was hitting Australia's Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. And I think that fits really well, really well. So this ban, might seem trivial. I mean, there are all sorts of other things going on in the world. Does it really matter whether a 15-year-old can access their Instagram? Well, maybe it does matter. And this aspect to Australia's chart, which completely symbolically fits the event, I think is quite outstanding. And we got a Venus return here. So Venus in Sagittarius and hitting Australia's Venus. I don't know, Venus return, you wouldn't really see that as being about a ban. Now, there may be another way of looking at these Sagittarian planets. Now, there is a view of Sagittarius that, of course, it is a free-thinking sign. It's about variety. It's about exploration, all that kind of stuff. But there's another way of looking at Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is a sign ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is a sign that is very moral. It has its own views. There is an idea about what is right and wrong. It's like the United States has Jupiter in Cancer in its chart. Jupiter, I think it's got a Jupiter-Venus conjunction in Cancer. And likewise, Jupiter's strong in Cancer, it's exalted in Cancer. But you would have thought Jupiter in Sagittarius, is that going to be moral and ideological? Yes, I would have said absolutely. That is certainly a possibility with Jupiter in this sign. And I do think that as a chart develops, when I say develop, I mean as a country gets older, I think it starts to grow into its chart. And so maybe we'll start with this ban, we're starting to see that Sagittarius. So what is it really about? What's the fundamentals of this ban? So one might think that it's about, for example, protecting young people from harm, and talking to strangers, talking to people who might hurt them, being exposed to harmful practices. So you can see that kind of makes sense. But it seems to me there may be an ideological side to it as well. Maybe it's about maintaining some kind of sort of ideological purity. The government maybe feels that its view of the world is the right view of the world, and doesn't want young people to be influenced by it. So I'm guessing with those aspects to Jupiter, to Australia's Jupiter in Sagittarius, that the core unconscious motivation for this ban on social media for those under 16 is not about the physical safety of young people, children, but rather about keeping them under control ideologically. At least that's what I would sense from the astrology of the situation. And perhaps the government would like to be able to extend that ban to everyone, but that would be difficult. But so focusing on the under 16s, well, is the best they can do. I suppose they could go for under 18s, but they've decided to go for the under 16s. And the Prime Minister of Australia, I mean, just a good idea to just quickly look at his chart. So here is Anthony Albanese's horoscope, and so what's going on in his chart when this ban takes place. I'm not saying anything goes on in his chart, and he's got Mercury and Saturn in Aquarius, and you could argue that there's something quite Aquarian, by the way, about this ban, because Aquarius has two sides to it. I mean, one side to Aquarius is about freedom, but there's the totalitarian side to Aquarius, wanting to be, in control. One way of looking at Aquarius, I do think is a good way of looking at Aquarius, is Gleichschaltung, which means everything running on the same circuit, which was an idea about government put forward by the Nazis, that everything should be running on the same circuit, and so the government knows what people are doing and has control even over private things like social media. And so that would be a way of looking at it. If everyone using social media has to have some kind of identity, then everyone is running on the same circuit. And so you could say that in some small way it sort of represents the Gleichschaltungization of Australian society. And Anthony Albanese having Mercury and Saturn in Aquarius, it could perhaps encourage him to want to be in control. That's what Aquarius is about. I mean, it's nothing personal. I mean, this is what he was born into. He had Saturn Aquarius, he has Mercury Mercury conjunct Saturn in Aquarius, and Keir Starmer has Saturn in Aquarius. I've got Saturn in Aquarius, but fortunately for everyone, I'm not in politics. But so that's one way of looking at it, and just doing a quick look at Anthony Albanese's his transits at the moment at the time of the ban. Here it is. I'm not sure if anything in particular is going on. I mean, he has had Saturn conjunct his Jupiter. I mean, maybe the Saturn conjunct Jupiter seemed to coincide with him sort of winning an election. So I don't think there's a huge amount going on there. I mean, with Pluto in Aquarius, I mean, I know it's not an exact transit, but he's got Saturn and Mercury in Aquarius, and so perhaps when Pluto moved into Aquarius, this might encourage him to be thinking about ways in which one could, assert control. So that's a way of trying to understand these transits, but I don't see anything huge going on. And finally, I wanted to look at this in terms from a generational perspective, to ask, who are these people that are being deprived of social media? So young people in their mid-teens, what do they have collectively? So here's a chart of a theoretical person, a theoretical young person born on December the 10th, 2009, who has their 16th birthday on the day of the ban. Remember, this person doesn't exist. I've set the chart for Sydney, but it doesn't mean anything. I'm not interested in the personal planets. I'm only interested in the outer planets. And the question I'm asking is, how would someone in their mid-teens, say a 15-year-old, respond to this ban on them being able to use the social media? And I'm being very, very general here, but what we can say is that a 15-year-old will have Neptune in Aquarius, and probably Jupiter in Aquarius as well. And they will also have Uranus in Pisces and Pluto in Capricorn. Yeah, they'll have Pluto in Capricorn. So we can make some generalizations there. I don't want to go really much further afield. Perhaps Saturn in Libra. But I think what I really wanted to mention is a Neptune in Aquarius. I mean, Aquarius is a sign, as I just said, it's got two natures. I mean, you can see it as being quite totalitarian about this Gleichschaltung, wanting to run everything on a single circuit. But another way of looking at things is to say, well, looking at Aquarius is to say, well, Aquarius is about freedom and being independent. And Neptune, forget what Neptune means in terms of confusion, the sea, whatever. It's just a bit of an Aquarius generation. Particularly those who've got Jupiter and Neptune in Aquarius. They want to be independent. They want to do things their own way. And particularly if you associate Aquarius with technology. So someone with Neptune in Aquarius, I don't think is going to take kindly to being denied social media. Even the suggestion of that is going to be very distressing for them. And they've also got Pluto in Capricorn. It's easy to say that this new generation, they don't know what they're doing, they're going to be manipulated and so forth. But Pluto in Capricorn, in its own way, is quite sensible. You could say that the collective has a Capricorn Aquarius feel to it. And so I think this idea of harm is possibly an exaggeration, and that the vast majority of teenagers using social media with Pluto in Aquarius, with Pluto in Capricorn, are really going to sort of know what they're doing. But from a governmental perspective, I would be more concerned about that Neptune in Aquarius. I think the Neptune in Aquarius is an independent-minded group of people. Okay, I'm trying to be objective here. I mean, we all have generational prejudices, and of course there is a prejudice that young people, oh, we're not independent-minded, they're completely influenced by trends, they don't have any attention span, whatever. But one just has to follow what the planets are saying. And here, Neptune in Aquarius, they want to do things their own way, and so I think that this could be quite damaging. This ban, and is not going to go down well with the Neptune in Aquarius generation. So anyway, that's it. Sorry, I don't know more about Australia, but I was just trying to concentrate on the astrology. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.